The gunshot echoed through the snowy mountain pass as Zara Jenkins clutched her fur-lined coat tighter, her breath forming clouds in the frigid Montana air. 3 men had been tracking her for days, and now they'd cornered her against the steep, unforgiving rock face with nowhere to run. Her horse had bolted half a mile back, spooked by the outlaws' warning shots. "Ain't nowhere to run now, Miss Jenkins," sneered the tallest of the 3, his face half hidden beneath a worn bandana. "Your pa's ranch is gonna fetch a fine price once we get you to sign it over." It was January 1876, and the harsh winter had descended upon Bozeman, Montana, with unrelenting fury. Zara had inherited the Whispering Pines Ranch after her father's passing 3 months prior, and it hadn't taken long for the vultures to circle. These men worked for Victor Holloway, a wealthy businessman from back east who'd been trying to buy up all the land in the valley. "I'll die before I sign anything," Zara shot back, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. At 24, she had learned to hide her emotions well, a necessity for a woman running a ranch alone in this unforgiving territory. "That can be arranged," replied another of the men, stepping forward and reaching for his holster. 2 shots rang out in rapid succession, and the man reaching for his gun crumpled to the snow, crimson blooming against the pristine white. The other 2 outlaws spun around, drawing their weapons as a rider on a powerful black stallion thundered toward them through the swirling snow. The mysterious rider fired again as he approached, his shot catching the second outlaw in the shoulder. The third man took aim, but before he could fire, the rider was upon them. In one fluid motion, he leaned down from his saddle, strong arm extending toward Zara. "Take my hand." He shouted above the howling wind. Zara didn't hesitate. As the remaining outlaws scrambled for cover, she grasped the stranger's gloved hand. With remarkable strength, he pulled her onto his horse in a single, smooth motion. She landed behind him on the saddle, instinctively wrapping her arms around his waist as the horse wheeled around and galloped away into the blinding snow. The third outlaw fired wildly after them, but the shots went wide, disappearing into the white wilderness as they made their escape. "Hold tight," the stranger called over his shoulder, his voice deep and commanding. Zara clung to him, the solid warmth of his body a stark contrast to the biting cold that surrounded them. Snow pelted her face as they rode hard through the mountain pass, putting distance between themselves and the remaining outlaws. After what seemed like an eternity, they descended into a sheltered valley, the worst of the storm blocked by the surrounding peaks. The rider slowed his horse to a walk, the animal's sides heaving with exertion, steam rising from its coal-black coat. "Are you hurt?" he asked, half turning in the saddle to look at her. For the first time, Zara could see his face, clearly rugged features framed by dark hair, eyes as blue as a summer sky, and a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of stubble. He couldn't have been more than 30 years old. "No," she managed, her teeth chattering from cold and adrenaline. "Thanks to you. Who are you?" "Tucker Lawson," he replied, guiding his horse toward a stand of pines. "Most folks just call me Tuck. I'm Zara Jenkins." "I know who you are, Miss Jenkins. Your reputation precedes you." There was a hint of admiration in his voice. "My reputation." The woman who refused to sell her ranch to Holloway despite his threats. Word travels, even in these parts. They reached the shelter of the trees, and Tucker dismounted in one smooth motion before reaching up to help her down. His hands were strong and sure on her waist, and for a moment they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. "Thank you," she said, taking a step back, "for saving my life back there." "Those men work for Holloway," Zara nodded. "They've been hounding me for weeks." "Today they caught me on my way back from town." Tucker's expression darkened. "Holloway's getting desperate. He's hired more guns since the railroad announced its plans." The railroad. This was news to Zara. They're planning a new line through the valley. "Anyone who owns land along the proposed route stands to make a fortune." He began unsaddling his horse. "We should make camp. Night's coming, and it's too dangerous to try to reach Bozeman in this weather." "You know the area well?" Zara asked, helping him with the gear. "I've been ranging these mountains for years." He didn't elaborate further but began gathering wood for a fire. There's a small cave just up this slope. It'll provide better shelter than these trees. The cave was shallow but deep enough to protect them from the wind and snow. Tucker had a fire going quickly, the flames casting dancing shadows on the rock walls. He pulled provisions from his saddlebags: jerky, hardtack, and a flask of whiskey. "It's not much," he apologized, offering her some of the food. "It's more than I expected to have tonight." She accepted the jerky gratefully. After a moment's hesitation, she also took a small sip from the flask when he offered it, the liquor burning a warm path down her throat. As they ate in silence, Zara studied her rescuer. His clothes were well worn but of good quality, not the garb of a drifter or common ranch hand. The rifle propped against the cave wall was expensive, as was the saddle he'd removed from his horse. Yet there was a wariness about him, the look of a man who'd seen more than his share of trouble. "You're not from around here," she finally said. It wasn't a question. Tucker met her gaze steadily. "No, madam, originally from Texas. What brings a Texan to Montana in the dead of winter? Business." When she continued to look at him expectantly, he sighed. "I'm tracking someone. A man named Blackwell. He stole something valuable from my employer." "You're a bounty hunter, among other things." Tucker took another sip from his flask. "I was on his trail when I heard the shots and saw those men cornering you." "Lucky for me," Zara said softly. "Maybe lucky for both of us." Tucker's eyes reflected the firelight. "I've been wanting to have a word with Holloway anyway. Rumor has it Blackwell might be working for him now." Zara pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. "Holloway has half the county in his pocket. Sheriff Barnes won't help. He looks the other way when Holloway's men cause trouble." "I don't need the sheriff," Tucker said with quiet confidence. "I just need information." They fell silent again, the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind outside the only sounds. Zara found herself studying Tucker's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands, capable hands that had saved her life, cradled the flask. There was something about him that inspired trust, despite the obvious danger that surrounded him. "Get some rest," Tucker said eventually, moving to the mouth of the cave to check on his horse. "I'll keep watch." "We should take turns," Zara insisted. "You need sleep too." Tucker looked back at her with something like respect in his eyes. "All right, I'll wake you in a few hours." Zara arranged her coat as best she could and lay down near the fire. Despite the hard ground and the events of the day, exhaustion soon pulled her toward sleep. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was Tucker Lawson's silhouette against the cave entrance, rifle across his knees, keeping guard as the Montana winter raged outside. When Zara awoke, weak daylight was filtering into the cave. She sat up with a start, realizing Tucker had let her sleep through the night. "Morning," he said, already packing up their meager camp. "Storms let up. We should make it to Bozeman by afternoon if we leave now." "You didn't wake me for my watch," she accused, rising to her feet. Tucker shrugged. "You needed the rest more than I did." "That's not for you to decide," Zara replied, bristling slightly. Being underestimated because she was a woman was something she faced daily, and she wouldn't stand for it, not even from the man who'd saved her life. Something like amusement flickered in Tucker's eyes. "Fair enough, next time I'll wake you." "Next time," she challenged, figure of speech. He handed her some jerky. "Breakfast. We should get moving before those outlaws pick up our trail again." They ate quickly and in silence before emerging from the cave. The world outside had been transformed into a glittering wonderland, the fresh snow untouched except for the tracks of a few woodland creatures. Tucker's horse, which he'd brought into the outer section of the cave overnight, snorted and pawed the ground, eager to move. "What's his name?" Zara asked, stroking the horse's velvet muzzle. "Midnight," Tucker replied, tightening the cinch on his saddle. "Best horse I've ever had. Smart enough to know when to run and when to stand his ground. Good qualities in a horse. And a man," Zara added, meeting Tucker's gaze. He held her look for a moment before turning away to check Midnight's bridle. "We'll need to ride double again. It'll slow us down, but it's safer than leaving you here." Zara didn't argue. The thought of being left alone in the wilderness with Holloway's men potentially searching for her was far worse than the prospect of riding pressed against Tucker Lawson again. They set off as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the snow sparkling like diamonds around them. Despite midnight carrying double, the horse maintained a steady pace, picking his way carefully down the snowy slopes toward the valley below. "How long have you been tracking this Blackwell?" Zara asked after they'd been riding for an hour. 3 months, Tucker replied. Started in Denver, followed him to Cheyenne, then north. Lost his trail in a blizzard near the Yellowstone, but picked it up again near Bozeman. He must have taken something very valuable. Tucker was silent for a moment. It's not just what he took, it's what he did in the taking. There was a darkness in his voice that made Zara hesitate before asking her next question. "What did he do?" "Killed a good man, my friend." Tucker's voice was flat. "Shot him in the back while he slept, then took what he came for." Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "I'm sorry." Tucker nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy without dwelling on it. "That's why I'm not stopping until I find him, no matter how long it takes." They rode in silence for a while longer, the only sounds the creak of the saddle leather and Midnight's steady breathing as he navigated the difficult terrain. Around midday, they crested a rise, and the valley opened up before them. In the distance, the smoke from Bozeman's chimneys rose into the clear winter sky. The sight brought both relief and apprehension to Zara. Home was close, but so were Holloway and his men. "We'll approach from the north," Tucker said, studying the landscape. "Less chance of being spotted that way." "My ranch is east of town," Zara informed him. "Whispering Pines," Tucker nodded. "I know it, good land. Your father built something fine there." "You knew my father, of him," Tucker clarified. "Thomas Jenkins had a reputation as a fair man, treated his hands well, kept his word." "That's rare enough to be noticed." Pride warmed Zara's chest. "He taught me everything I know about ranching. When he died, most folks expected me to sell up and move back east to my mother's family. But this land is in my blood now. I couldn't leave it if I tried." "Holloway's counting on breaking that resolve," Tucker said grimly. "He'll be disappointed then." Zara's voice was steel. They continued down the slope, the going easier now as they reached more level ground. The temperature was rising slightly as the day progressed, causing the top layer of snow to glisten with moisture. Tucker suddenly pulled Midnight to a halt, his posture alert. "Riders," he said quietly, nodding toward a distant ridge where 3 small figures on horseback were visible. "Holloway's men?" Zara asked, tensing behind him. "Can't tell from here, but we shouldn't take chances." Tucker guided Midnight into a copse of trees, providing them with cover while they watched the distant riders. The men seemed to be following a trail, moving slowly and studying the ground. Tracking them, Zara realized with a chill. "They're following our tracks from yesterday," Tucker confirmed her fears. "Snow's made it easy for them." "What do we do?" Tucker considered for a moment. "We could make a run for town, but Midnight's tired carrying double." "We wouldn't outpace them for long." He scanned the area. "There's a homestead about 2 miles east of here. Old Man Winters. He's no friend of Holloway's." "I know Jacob Winters," Zara said. "He helped my father when we first came to the valley. Then that's where we're headed." Tucker turned Midnight away from their original path and urged him into a canter, keeping to the tree line as much as possible to avoid being spotted. They reached the Winters homestead. 20 minutes later, a modest cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, a small barn, and a corral where a few horses huddled together against the cold. An older man with a white beard emerged from the barn as they approached, a shotgun in his hands. "That's far enough," he called, raising the weapon. Tucker halted Midnight and raised one hand. "Jacob Winters, name's Tucker Lawson. This is Zara Jenkins. We're looking for shelter." The old man squinted at them. "Thomas Jenkins' girl." "Yes, Mr. Winters," Zara called. "We're in some trouble." Jacob lowered his shotgun slightly. "What kind of trouble?" "Holloway's men," Tucker replied. 3 of them tracking us through the snow. They'll be here soon if we don't throw them off our trail." Jacob spat into the snow. "Holloway should have known." He gestured toward the barn. "Get your horse inside. I'll deal with any visitors." They quickly dismounted, and Tucker led Midnight into the barn. Inside, it was warmer, the smell of hay and horses familiar and comforting to Zara after the long, cold ride. "Been a while since I've seen you, girl," Jacob said as he followed them in, closing the barn doors. "Not since your pa's funeral." "I've had my hands full at the ranch," Zara explained, stomping her feet to restore circulation. "Especially with Holloway's men making trouble," Jacob nodded grimly. "Heard about that. Holloway's been pressuring everyone in the valley to sell." He turned his attention to Tucker. "Don't know you, though. What's your stake in this?" Tucker was unsaddling Midnight, his movements efficient. "I'm tracking a man named Blackwell. Word is he's working for Holloway now." Recognition flashed in Jacob's eyes. Blackwell, mean-looking fella, scar across his right cheek, Tucker's hands stilled on the saddle. "That's him. He was in town 3 days ago, drinking at the Rusty Nail, throwing money around like he had plenty to spare." Jacob stroked his beard. "Holloway's got a hunting lodge up in the hills. Rumor is he's holed up there with some of his hired guns, planning something big." "The railroad," Zara said, remembering what Tucker had told her. Jacob nodded. "Heard those whispers too. Northern Pacific's looking to lay track through the valley. Anyone who owns land on the route could make a fortune." He looked at Zara. "Your ranch sits right where they'd likely want to build a depot." "Which is why Holloway's so determined to get me to sell," Zara realized, anger bubbling up inside her. He knew about the railroad plans all along. "And he's hired every gun he can find to make sure he gets what he wants," Tucker added, his expression grim. "Including Blackwell." A distant sound made Jacob move to the barn door, cracking it open to peer outside. "Riders coming, 3 of them just like you said." He closed the door and turned to them. "Get up in the hayloft. I'll handle this." Tucker grabbed his rifle and helped Zara climb the ladder to the hayloft. They positioned themselves where they could see through a small gap in the boards but wouldn't be visible from below. Minutes later, they heard hoofbeats approaching the barn, followed by men's voices and Jacob's gruffer tones responding. The barn door opened, and Jacob entered, followed by 3 men, the same outlaws who had cornered Zara the previous day. One had his arm in a makeshift sling, courtesy of Tucker's shot. "Just need to check your barn, old man," the leader was saying, his hand resting on his holster in a not-so-subtle threat. "What for?" Jacob demanded, standing his ground, looking for fugitives. "Jenkins woman and a man who shot my friend here." He nodded toward the injured outlaw. "Track them this direction." "Haven't seen anyone," Jacob said flatly. "Now, unless you've got a warrant, I suggest you get off my property." The leader smiled unpleasantly. "Don't need a warrant. Mr. Holloway's given us authority to search wherever we please." "Holloway doesn't own the law," Jacob retorted. "As good as," the outlaw replied. "Now step aside, old man." Above them, Tucker silently readied his rifle. Beside him, Zara held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the men below must hear it. Jacob didn't move. "I fought Indians and outlaws to build this place. I'm not afraid of Holloway's hired thugs." The leader's face darkened. "Your choice." He nodded to his companions, who spread out in the barn, beginning to search. One headed toward the ladder to the hayloft. Tucker shifted position silently, taking aim. Zara touched his arm, shaking her head slightly. If shooting started in the confined space of the barn, Jacob could easily be caught in the crossfire. Below them, the outlaw had just placed his foot on the first rung of the ladder when a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. The sound of multiple horses and men's voices carried through the barn walls. "Winters, you in there?" a voice called. Jacob smiled grimly. "That'll be Sheriff Barnes. I sent my boy to fetch him when I saw you riding up." The outlaws exchanged uncertain glances. While the sheriff might look the other way when it came to Holloway's business dealings, even he couldn't ignore outright trespassing and threatening at gunpoint. "This isn't over," the leader growled, backing toward the door. "Holloway will hear about this." "Tell him to come himself next time," Jacob replied, "instead of sending boys to do a man's job." The outlaws retreated, and moments later, they heard the sheriff's voice exchanging words with them outside, followed by the sound of horses departing. Jacob looked up at the hayloft. "You can come down now, they're gone." Tucker and Zara descended the ladder, relief evident on both their faces. "Thank you," Zara said warmly, grasping Jacob's weathered hand. You took a risk for us. Jacob waved away her thanks. Your father would have done the same for me. He looked toward the barn door. Sheriff didn't actually come. That was just my boy and some of the hands making noise. Barnes is too deep in Holloway's pocket to be any real help. Smart thinking, Tucker acknowledged, impressed. They'll be back, though, Jacob warned, and in greater numbers. You two need to get somewhere safe, he thought for a moment. There's an old trapper's cabin up near Wolf Creek. Nobody's used it in years, but it's solid. You could lie low there while you figure out your next move. Tucker considered this. How far? About 10 miles northwest. My boy can show you the way. Jacob studied Tucker. You planning to go after Blackwell at Holloway's lodge? Yes. Jacob nodded slowly. Thought as much. Lodge is well guarded, but there's a back approach through a ravine that few know about. I can draw you a map. While Jacob sketched a rough map on a piece of paper, his son, a young man of about 18, prepared a pack of provisions for them. You'll need to leave your horse here, Jacob told Tucker. Those men will be watching for him. Take one of mine instead, they won't recognize him. Tucker hesitated, clearly reluctant to part with Midnight. I'll come back for him, he told the horse, stroking his neck. An hour later, mounted on one of Jacob's sturdy mountain horses, Tucker and Zara followed Jacob's son, Daniel, into the hills northwest of the homestead. The snow had begun again, light flurries that would help cover their tracks. Daniel led them through dense forest, along frozen creeks and up steep, rocky slopes. It was slow going, the horse carefully picking his way through the difficult terrain. Zara clung to Tucker's back, the journey giving her plenty of time to think about her situation. She had never felt so hunted, so vulnerable, yet at the same time, the solid presence of Tucker Lawson before her gave her a sense of security she hadn't expected. A man she had known for less than a day, yet one she was trusting with her life. By late afternoon, they reached the trapper's cabin, a small, sturdy structure nestled in a grove of pines, nearly invisible until they were right upon it. Daniel helped them unsaddle the horse and get settled. Pa says to stay here at least 3 days, the young man advised. Give Holloway's men time to lose interest. There's enough provisions to last a week. He nodded toward a stone chimney. Keep fires small and only at night. Smoke can be seen for miles up here. Thank you, Daniel, Zara said warmly. Your father is a good man. The best, Daniel agreed. He says if anyone can stand up to Holloway, it's Thomas Jenkins' daughter and a man crazy enough to ride into a gunfight to save a stranger. He grinned at Tucker, who merely nodded in acknowledgement. After Daniel left, promising to return in 3 days, Tucker and Zara took stock of their temporary home. The cabin was small but well built, with a small stone fireplace, a rough wooden table with 2 stools, and a single bed frame with a straw-filled mattress. I'll take the floor, Tucker said immediately, noting the single bed. Don't be ridiculous, Zara replied. It's freezing, we can share the bed, I trust you're a gentleman. Tucker raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. I'll check the perimeter, make sure we're secure. While he was outside, Zara explored the cabin more thoroughly. There was a small storage area with the promised provisions: salted meat, beans, coffee, flour, and even some dried apples. A shelf held a few battered books left behind by previous occupants. She selected one, a collection of poetry that looked to have survived several owners. Tucker returned as she was paging through the book. All clear, he reported, stomping snow from his boots. No signs anyone's been here in months. Good. Zara closed the book. I found food. We should eat something. They prepared a simple meal together, working in companionable silence. Tucker built a small fire in the fireplace, careful to use only dry wood that would produce minimal smoke. As the cabin warmed, they sat at the rough table and ate. What will you do? Zara asked eventually. About Blackwell, Tucker's expression hardened. Find him, make him pay for what he did. And after that, he looked at her, seeming surprised by the question. Hadn't thought that far ahead, go back to Texas maybe, or keep moving. There's always work for a man who knows how to handle trouble. Is that how you see yourself? A troubleshooter? Tucker considered this. I've been called worse. He studied her across the table. What about you? After all this is over, keep the ranch running. Make it profitable enough that men like Holloway can't force me out. Zara's determination was evident in her voice. It won't be easy. Most of the hands left after my father died didn't want to work for a woman, but I'll manage. I believe you will, Tucker said, and there was genuine respect in his tone. The evening deepened around them, the fire casting long shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the wind had picked up, whistling through the pine trees and rattling the cabin's single window. We should get some rest, Tucker suggested, clearing away their meal things. Been a long couple of days. Zara nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The events of the past 2 days being cornered by outlaws, rescued by a stranger, hiding from Holloway's men had taken their toll. They settled into the bed awkwardly, both fully clothed except for their boots, a respectful distance between them. Tucker had insisted she take the side closer to the wall, placing himself between her and the door, a protective gesture that Zara found both unnecessary and strangely touching. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Zara. Beside her, Tucker's breathing had evened out, suggesting he had no such trouble. She lay awake, listening to the wind and the occasional crackle of the dying fire, her mind racing with thoughts of her ranch, of Holloway's threats, of the man sleeping beside her. You should sleep. Tucker's voice suddenly came through the darkness, startling her. I thought you were asleep, she whispered back, light sleeper. She could hear the shrug in his voice. Comes with the territory. What territory is that? Bounty hunting? Tucker was silent for a moment. Among other things, I was a Texas Ranger for a while, then a scout for the Army, then. Well, whatever paid the bills. A man of many talents, Zara observed. Jack of all trades, master of none, as my pa used to say. I doubt that's true, Zara countered. You seem very capable to me. Another silence, longer this time. Get some sleep, Zara. Tomorrow we need to plan our next move. It was the first time he'd used her first name, she realized. The sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through her. Good night, Tucker, she replied softly. Tuck, he corrected. My friends call me Tuck. Good night, Tuck, she amended, a small smile playing on her lips as she finally closed her eyes and drifted into sleep. Morning arrived with brilliant sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window. Zara woke to find herself alone in the bed, the spot beside her cold. For a panicked moment, she thought Tucker had left, but then she heard movement outside. Pulling on her boots, she went to the door and opened it to find Tucker chopping wood, his breath forming clouds in the crisp air. He'd removed his coat despite the cold, and the exertion had brought a healthy color to his face. He looked up as she appeared. Morning, he greeted her. Thought I'd get some wood chopped before the day got busy. Busy with what? Zara asked, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. Tucker embedded the axe in the chopping block. Planning. If we're going to deal with Holloway and Blackwell, we need a strategy. Zara raised an eyebrow. I thought Blackwell was your concern and Holloway was mine. They're working together now, Tucker pointed out. And from what Jacob told us, they're at the same location. Makes sense to tackle the problem together. Zara couldn't argue with his logic. All right, what do you propose? First breakfast, Tucker replied, gathering an armful of split logs. Hard to plan on an empty stomach. Over a meal of coffee, hardtack, and dried meat, they discussed their options. Tucker spread out the rough map Jacob had drawn, pointing out the approach to Holloway's hunting lodge. The ravine gives us cover almost to the back door, he explained, but once we're there, we'll be outnumbered. We need help, Zara concluded. Yes, but who? The sheriff's in Holloway's pocket, and most of the townsfolk are too afraid to cross him. Zara thought for a moment. Not everyone. There's Hank Brubaker, he owns the general store in Bozeman. Holloway tried to force him out last year, but Hank stood his ground, and there's Doc Miller. He treated one of my ranch hands after Holloway's men roughed him up, refused to take payment. Good men, but not fighters, Tucker observed. No, but they have connections. Hank's son is a deputy marshal over in Helena, and Doc Miller served in the war. He knows people. Tucker nodded slowly. It's a start, if we could get word to them. Daniel, Zara suggested. When he comes back, we could send a message with him. 3 days is a long time to wait, Tucker said, frowning. Holloway and Blackwell could be gone by then. Then one of us needs to go to town, Zara decided. Tonight, under cover of darkness. Tucker shook his head immediately. Too dangerous. Holloway's men will be watching for you. Then you go, Zara countered. They're less likely to recognize you, especially in the dark. Tucker considered this. It could work, but I don't like leaving you alone here. I can take care of myself, Zara reminded him. My father taught me to shoot when I was 12. It's not that, Tucker said, his eyes meeting hers across the table. Those men tracked us to Jacob's place. They could be searching these hills as we speak. All the more reason to get help sooner rather than later, Zara insisted. Tucker finally nodded, seeing the logic in her argument. All right, I'll go tonight, but you need to be prepared in case there's trouble while I'm gone. He reached into his boot and pulled out a small revolver. Take this, it's loaded. Zara accepted the weapon, testing its weight in her hand. I have my own back at the ranch, Father's old Navy Colt. Keep this one close until then, Tucker advised. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Tucker studied the map, memorizing the route to Bozeman. Zara wrote messages for Hank Brubaker and Doc Miller, careful to phrase them in a way that wouldn't compromise the men if the notes were intercepted. As dusk fell, Tucker prepared to leave. He decided to go on foot rather than take the horse. It would be slower but less conspicuous. The night was clear and cold, with a half moon providing just enough light to navigate by. I should be back by dawn, he told Zara as he checked his weapons one last time. If I'm not, wait for Daniel as planned. Don't try to come after me. Be careful, Zara said, surprising herself by reaching out to touch his arm. Holloway's men won't hesitate to shoot first and ask questions later. Tucker covered her hand with his own, the brief contact sending a spark through her. I've faced worse odds. His voice softened. Bar the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me or Daniel. Zara nodded, suddenly reluctant to see him go. In the short time they'd known each other, Tucker Lawson had become a steadying presence, a rock in the chaotic storm her life had become. With a final nod, Tucker slipped out into the darkness. Zara barred the door as instructed and moved to the window, watching his form disappear among the trees. The cabin felt suddenly larger and emptier without him. To distract herself, Zara tended the fire and prepared a small meal. She tried reading from the book of poetry she'd found, but her mind kept wandering, imagining Tucker making his way through the snowy forest, picturing Holloway's men lying in wait. Hours passed. Zara dozed intermittently in a chair by the fire, the small revolver Tucker had given her within easy reach. Every sound from outside the crack of a branch, the hoot of an owl brought her fully awake, alert for danger. It was near midnight when she heard the unmistakable sound of approaching horses. More than one, moving slowly, as if their riders were trying to be stealthy. Zara extinguished the lamp and moved to the window, peering out into the moonlit night. 3 riders were approaching the cabin, their forms dark silhouettes against the snow. They weren't Tucker or Daniel, her heart racing. Zara grabbed the revolver and checked that it was loaded. She looked around the cabin, evaluating her options. There was no back door, no escape route except the single window too small for a grown man but perhaps just large enough for her. The riders had reached the clearing now. They dismounted, speaking in low voices. Zara strained to hear. Tracks lead right here, one was saying. Fresh ones too. Check inside, another ordered. Remember, Holloway wants the woman alive. The man doesn't matter. Zara's blood ran cold. They had found them. Moving quickly, she gathered her coat and Tucker's messages, stuffing them into her pockets. The window was her only chance. Carefully, she unlatched it, wincing at the slight squeak of the hinges. Outside, the men were approaching the door. One tried the handle, finding it barred. Someone's inside, he called to his companions. Door's locked. Break it down, came the reply. Zara pushed the window open and squeezed through the narrow opening just as the first impact shook the cabin door. She dropped into the snow outside, ducking low beside the cabin wall. The men were all at the front, focused on breaking down the door. Taking advantage of their distraction, Zara crept along the side of the cabin toward the back. The snow crunched softly beneath her boots, but the noise of the men's efforts covered the sound. She had almost reached the tree line when the cabin door finally gave way with a splintering crash. "Search the place," one man shouted. Zara didn't wait to hear more. She plunged into the forest, running as fast as the deep snow would allow. Behind her, she heard shouts as the men discovered the cabin empty, followed by curses as they spotted her tracks leading away from the window. There. Tracks heading into the trees. Get the horses. Zara ran harder, her breath coming in painful gasps as she pushed through the snow. The forest was dense, the moonlight creating a confusing pattern of light and shadow that made it difficult to navigate. She had no clear destination in mind. Her only goal was to put distance between herself and Holloway's men. The sound of horses crashing through the underbrush spurred her on. They were gaining on her men on horseback, could cover ground much faster than a woman on foot in deep snow. Desperately, Zara changed direction, heading uphill where the trees grew more densely, hoping to find terrain too difficult for horses. A shot rang out, the bullet splintering bark from a tree near her head. Zara ducked instinctively but kept moving. They were close enough to shoot too close. The ground suddenly dropped away beneath her feet, and Zara found herself sliding down a steep, snow-covered slope. She tumbled, unable to stop her descent, branches and rocks tearing at her clothes as she fell. Finally, she came to a halt at the bottom, the breath knocked from her lungs, disoriented and bruised. Above her, she could hear the men calling to each other, their voices muffled by distance and the trees. Where'd she go? Down there, I saw her fall. Can't take the horses down that slope. We'll have to go around. Zara forced herself to her feet, wincing at the pain in her right ankle. Not broken, she thought, but definitely sprained. She glanced around, trying to get her bearings. She had fallen into a narrow ravine, the sides steep but not impossible to climb. At the bottom ran a frozen creek, its surface glinting in the moonlight. Decision made, Zara began following the creek downstream. The ice looked solid enough to support her weight, and it would leave no tracks for the men to follow. Each step sent pain shooting up her leg, but she gritted her teeth and pressed on. Her life depended on putting as much distance as possible between herself and Holloway's men. She had been walking for perhaps 10 minutes when she heard the men again, their voices closer now. They had found a way into the ravine and were searching for her. Zara looked frantically for somewhere to hide, but the ravine walls offered little cover. Then she saw a dark opening in the ravine wall, partially hidden by an overhanging ledge of snow and ice. A cave, or at least a deep recess in the rock face. Without hesitation, Zara limped toward it, praying it would be deep enough to conceal her. The opening led to a narrow tunnel that widened after a few feet into a small cave. It was pitch black inside, the air cold and damp. Zara pressed herself against the back wall, trying to control her breathing, listening intently for sounds of pursuit. Minutes passed. She could hear the men moving along the ravine, their voices growing louder then fading as they passed by her hiding place without discovering it. Still, she didn't dare move, afraid they might double back or have left someone to watch. Time became meaningless in the darkness of the cave. Zara huddled against the cold stone, her injured ankle throbbing, her body beginning to shiver uncontrollably as the adrenaline wore off and the cold set in. She knew she couldn't stay there indefinitely. Eventually, she would need to find shelter and warmth or risk freezing to death. But which way to go? She had lost all sense of direction in her panicked flight. Bozeman lay somewhere to the southeast, but without the sun to guide her, she had no way of determining which way that was. Her best hope was to find Tucker, but he could be anywhere between the cabin and town. As dawn approached, bringing a faint lightening of the darkness outside the cave, Zara made her decision. She would follow the ravine downstream, staying close to the walls where there was more cover. Sooner or later, the ravine had to lead to a larger valley where she might find help or at least get her bearings. Gingerly, she made her way out of the cave, scanning the ravine for any sign of Holloway's men. Finding none, she began her painful journey downstream, using a branch as a makeshift crutch to take some weight off her injured ankle. The sky continued to lighten as she walked, revealing a clear winter morning. The beauty of the snow-covered landscape stood in stark contrast to the danger Zara found herself in alone, injured, miles from help, with Holloway's men still searching for her. She had been walking for perhaps an hour when she heard the sound of a horse nearby. Ducking behind a large boulder, Zara peered cautiously around it, expecting to see one of her pursuers. Instead, her heart leaped at the sight of Tucker Lawson, mounted on a different horse than they had borrowed from Jacob, scanning the ravine with a rifle ready in his hands. "Tuck," she called, stepping out from her hiding place. Tucker wheeled his horse around, relief washing over his face as he spotted her. "Zara," he dismounted quickly, crossing to her in long strides. "Are you hurt? What happened?" "Holloway's men found the cabin," she explained breathlessly as he reached her. "I managed to escape through the window, but they chased me. I fell down into this ravine." Tucker's expression darkened. "I saw them on my way back, 3 riders heading away from the cabin. I was afraid." He stopped, his eyes taking in her disheveled appearance, the makeshift crutch, the exhaustion evident on her face. "You're injured." "It's just a sprained ankle," Zara assured him. "Nothing serious." Without another word, Tucker lifted her in his arms and carried her to his horse. The unexpected action surprised Zara, but she was too tired and cold to protest. He helped her into the saddle before mounting behind her, his arms coming around her to take the reins. "I need to get you somewhere warm," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "You're half frozen." "Did you reach town?" Zara asked, leaning back against him gratefully, drawing from his warmth. "Yes, got your messages to Brubaker and Doc Miller. They're gathering men they can trust, planning to meet us tomorrow at Jacob Winter's place." Tucker guided the horse carefully along the ravine. "But first, we need to find shelter for today. Those men might come back." "Where did you get the horse?" Zara asked, noticing for the first time that it wasn't the one they had borrowed from Jacob. "Borrowed it from a farm outside Bozeman," Tucker replied. "Left a note and some money. Figured changing mounts would make us harder to track." They rode for another hour, following the ravine until it opened into a wider valley. Tucker seemed to know where he was going, guiding the horse confidently through the wilderness. Eventually, they came to a small, abandoned line shack, a basic structure used by cowboys when working cattle in distant pastures. "It's not much," Tucker said as he helped her dismount, "but it'll keep us out of the weather until tomorrow." The shack was indeed humble, a single room with a small wood stove, a rickety table, and a narrow bunk. But to Zara, it looked like a palace after her night in the snow and the cave. Tucker helped her inside and settled her on the bunk before going back out to care for the horse. When he returned, he quickly got a fire going in the wood stove. As warmth began to fill the small space, Zara felt the tension start to leave her body, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. Tucker knelt beside her, gently examining her injured ankle. His touch was surprisingly gentle for such strong hands. "Swollen, but I don't think it's broken," he concluded. "We should wrap it, though." He tore a strip from a relatively clean cloth he found in the shack and carefully bound her ankle. "Thank you," Zara said softly, watching his bent head as he worked, "for coming back for me." Tucker looked up, his blue eyes meeting hers. "I never considered not coming back." Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, an understanding that went beyond words. Zara found herself reaching out, her hand coming to rest against his cheek. Tucker went still, his eyes never leaving hers. "I barely know you," she whispered, "yet I trust you with my life." "Sometimes," Tucker replied, his voice low, "you just know a person's measure right away." He covered her hand with his own, turning his face slightly to press his lips against her palm in a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. The moment was broken by a sound outside, a branch snapping under weight. Tucker was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, moving to the window with the silent grace of a predator. "Rider coming," he reported, his voice tight. "Single horseman." Zara struggled to her feet, ignoring the pain in her ankle. "One of Holloway's men?" Tucker shook his head. "Can't tell yet." He positioned himself beside the door, motioning for Zara to stay back. "Get behind the stove. If shooting starts, keep low." The horse and rider came closer, the sound of hooves crunching in snow growing louder. Then a voice called out, "Hello, the cabin, anyone home?" Tucker and Zara exchanged glances. The voice was young, a boy or a youth. "Who's asking?" Tucker called back, not lowering his rifle. "Daniel Winters. Pa sent me to look for you, said you might need help." Relief flooded through Zara. "It's Jacob's son," she told Tucker. Tucker nodded but remained cautious. "Come in slowly," he called. "Hands where I can see them." The door opened, and Daniel Winters stepped inside, his hands raised shoulder high. His young face broke into a grin when he saw them. "Found you. Pa was worried when your horse came back to our place without you." Tucker lowered his rifle. "Smart horse finding his way back. How'd you track us here?" "Wasn't hard," Daniel replied, lowering his hands. "Followed your tracks from where they found the cabin, figured you'd head for the valley." He looked at Zara, noting her bandaged ankle. "You're hurt, Miss Jenkins. It's not serious," Zara assured him. Daniel nodded, then turned serious. "There's news from town. Holloway's gathering his men. Word is he's planning something big for tomorrow, something to do with your ranch, Miss Jenkins." "The railroad deal," Tucker guessed. "He must be making his move." "Pa thinks so too," Daniel confirmed. "That's why he sent me to find you. The men Brubaker and Doc Miller gathered are meeting at our place tonight. Pa says if you're going to stop Holloway, it needs to be before he makes his move tomorrow." Tucker and Zara exchanged looks. Their timetable had just been accelerated. "Can you ride?" Tucker asked Zara, concern evident in his voice. "I'll manage," she replied with determination. "I'm not letting Holloway take my ranch without a fight." Tucker nodded, respect in his eyes. "Then we ride for the Winters place." Now, the journey to Jacob Winters' homestead was slow and painful for Zara, but she endured it without complaint. Tucker insisted she ride with him, while Daniel led the way on his own horse. The day was wearing on toward evening by the time they arrived, the setting sun casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. Jacob Winters met them in the yard, his weathered face breaking into a smile of relief when he saw them. "Thank God, when your horse came back without you, I feared the worst." "It was close," Tucker acknowledged, helping Zara dismount. "Holloway's men found the cabin, but Zara managed to escape." Jacob nodded grimly. "They're getting bolder. Came into town today, throwing their weight around, telling folks to stay inside tomorrow if they know what's good for them." He gestured toward the house. "Come inside, the others are waiting." The Winters' modest home was crowded with men Hank Brubaker from the general store, Doc Miller, and about a dozen others, all looking grim and determined. They made room for Zara at the table while Doc Miller immediately moved to examine her injured ankle. "It's a gathering of the unwelcome," Hank Brubaker said with a humorless laugh. "Every man here has reason to hate Holloway. And every man here is willing to stand against him," added Doc Miller as he rewrapped Zara's ankle with a clean bandage. "Though I must say, taking on Holloway's gang is a daunting prospect. He's got at least 20 men at his disposal." 23, corrected a tall, broad-shouldered man near the door, "including Blackwell and the Sanchez brothers. Mean bunch of killers, all of them." At the mention of Blackwell, Tucker's expression hardened. "Where are they now?" he asked. "Most are at Holloway's hunting lodge," Jacob replied, spreading out a crude map on the table. "It's here about 5 miles north of Bozeman. The rest are in town, keeping an eye on things." "What's his plan?" Zara asked. "Daniel mentioned something about my ranch," Hank Brubaker nodded. "Holloway's been bragging to his cronies, says by tomorrow night he'll own Whispering Pines Ranch one way or another. Word is he's got papers forged with your signature, Miss Jenkins. Plans to file them with the county clerk tomorrow morning." "He can't do that," Zara protested. "It's forgery, fraud." "The county clerk is his cousin," Doc Miller pointed out grimly. "And with the sheriff in his pocket too, who's to stop him?" "We are," Tucker said quietly, his voice carrying in the suddenly silent room. All eyes turned to him. "Holloway's made one crucial mistake. He's gathered all his men in one place." "You suggesting we attack the hunting lodge?" asked the broad-shouldered man skeptically. "That's suicide." "Place is like a fortress." "Not from the back approach," Tucker countered, pointing to the map. "Jacob's ravine route leads right to the rear of the property. They won't be expecting trouble from that direction." "Even so, we're outnumbered," Doc Miller pointed out. "Not if we're smart about it," Tucker replied. He looked around the room, assessing the men. "How many of you fought in the war?" About half the men raised their hands. "Then you know that superior numbers don't always win the day. Strategy does." Tucker began outlining his plan, pointing to different locations on the map as he spoke. We split into 3 groups. One creates a diversion at the front of the lodge, make them think it's the main attack. A second group comes in through the ravine to the rear. And the third secures the escape routes to prevent Holloway from running. The men listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others looking more uncertain. "What about Blackwell?" asked Jacob. "You said he's your primary target." "Blackwell will be with Holloway," Tucker replied confidently. "He's Holloway's new right-hand man. Where one goes, the other follows." Zara watched as Tucker continued to detail the plan, struck by the natural authority he commanded. These men, many older and more established than he, deferred to him without question, recognizing the experience and competence in his words. It was another side of him, one that spoke of a past filled with more than just drifting from job to job. When he finished speaking, there was a moment of silence as the men considered his words. Then Hank Brubaker stood. "I'm in," he declared. "Holloway ran my brother's business into the ground last year. It's time someone stood up to him." One by one, the others voiced their agreement. Tucker nodded in satisfaction, then turned to Zara. "You should stay here," he told her quietly. "Your ankle?" "No," Zara interrupted firmly. "This is my fight more than anyone's. Holloway is threatening my ranch, my home. I'm coming." Tucker looked as if he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him. "All right," he conceded, "but you stay with me. No heroics." The planning continued well into the night, with Jacob providing detailed information about the hunting lodge and the surrounding terrain. The men cleaned and checked their weapons, prepared horses, and discussed signals and fallback positions. It was near midnight when the meeting finally broke up, the men departing to get what rest they could before the confrontation. Jacob showed Zara to a small bedroom, apologizing for its simplicity. "It was my daughter's before she married and moved to Helena," he explained. "Not much, but the bed's comfortable." "It's perfect," Zara assured him. "Thank you for everything you've done, Jacob." The old man waved away her thanks. "Thomas Jenkins would have done the same for me. Get some rest, girl. Tomorrow will be a long day." After he left, Zara sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the past few days swirling in her mind. How quickly life could change from running her ranch in relative peace to being hunted by Holloway's men to planning what amounted to a small war. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Tucker entered, carrying a steaming mug. "Jacob's wife thought you might like some tea," he said, offering it to her. "Help you sleep." "Thank you." Zara accepted the mug gratefully, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. Tucker remained standing, looking somewhat awkward, as if he had more to say but wasn't sure how to begin. "You're good at this," Zara observed after a moment. "Planning, taking charge, the men respect you." Tucker shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I've had practice." "More than just among other things, I think," Zara pressed gently. "Who are you really, Tucker Lawson?" He was silent for a long moment, his blue eyes studying her face as if making a decision. Finally, he sighed and sat down beside her on the bed. "I was a captain in the war," he said quietly, "led a company of Texas volunteers. After the war ended, I joined the Rangers, like I told you. But I left out the part where I ended up leading one of their most successful companies for 5 years. "Why did you leave?" Zara asked. Tucker's expression grew distant. "Lost men in an ambush, good men, my men, should have seen it coming, but I was distracted." His jaw tightened. "I resigned my commission after that, felt I no longer deserved to lead." "Is that when you started tracking Blackwell?" "No, that came later. I drifted for a while, took odd jobs, eventually found work with the Pinkerton agency. That's who I'm working for now, technically." "Blackwell stole bonds worth thousands from a Denver bank, killed the night watchman, my friend, in the process." "So the Pinkertons sent you after him," Zara concluded. Tucker nodded. "They did, but it's personal for me too. The man he killed, Sam Davis, saved my life during the war. I owe him a debt I can never repay." Zara reached out, covering his hand with hers. "I'm sorry about your friend." Tucker turned his hand to clasp hers, his grip warm and strong. "Tomorrow it ends one way or another. We'll face it together," Zara said with conviction. "All of us." Tucker's eyes searched hers, a mixture of emotions playing across his face. You're remarkable, Zara Jenkins. Most women would be terrified after what you've been through. Oh, I'm terrified, Zara admitted with a small smile. But my father always taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. Wise man, your father. He was. Zara hesitated, then asked, "What will you do after tomorrow, after Blackwell is brought to justice?" Tucker was quiet for a moment, his thumb absently stroking the back of her hand. "I haven't thought that far ahead. Perhaps you should," Zara suggested softly. "There's more to life than chasing the next job, the next bounty." Something flickered in Tucker's eyes, a hint of longing, quickly masked. "Perhaps." He rose to his feet, reluctantly releasing her hand. "You should rest. Dawn comes early." "Tucker," Zara called as he reached the door. He paused, looking back at her. "Be careful tomorrow." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Always am." After he left, Zara finished her tea and lay down, expecting sleep to elude her given the day ahead. But exhaustion won out, and she drifted off almost immediately, her dreams filled with images of Tucker Lawson standing tall against Holloway's men, his blue eyes clear and determined. Dawn broke cold and clear the next morning. Zara woke to the sounds of men preparing in the yard outside, horses being saddled, weapons checked, last-minute instructions exchanged. She dressed quickly, wincing as she pulled her boot over her swollen ankle. It was painful but bearable, she could ride. In the kitchen, Jacob's wife, Martha, pressed a plate of food into her hands. "Eat," the older woman insisted. "No telling when you'll get another chance." Zara obeyed, though anxiety had robbed her of her appetite. Through the window, she could see Tucker conferring with Jacob and some of the other men, his expression serious as he pointed toward the distant hills. By the time she joined them outside, the men had divided into the three groups as planned. Tucker would lead the group approaching from the rear through the ravine, Jacob would lead the diversion at the front of the lodge, and Hank Brubaker would take charge of securing the escape routes. "Ready?" Tucker asked as she approached. Zara nodded, adjusting the revolver at her hip. She had insisted on being armed, and no one had argued. "As I'll ever be." Tucker helped her mount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Stay close to me," he reminded her, concern evident in his voice. "I will," she promised. They set out as the sun cleared the eastern hills, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. Their group, consisting of Tucker, Zara, and 5 other men, took a circuitous route to avoid being spotted, heading west before turning north toward the ravine that would lead them to the back of Holloway's hunting lodge. The mood was somber, each rider lost in their own thoughts as they contemplated what lay ahead. Zara found herself watching Tucker, drawing strength from his steady presence. Whatever happened today, she was grateful fate had brought him into her life, even under such dangerous circumstances. They reached the entrance to the ravine by mid-morning. Tucker called a halt, gathering everyone around to review the plan one last time. "Jacob's group will create the diversion in 30 minutes, he reminded them. "That's our signal to move in. Remember, Holloway is the priority. Without him, his men will likely scatter, and Blackwell." His expression hardened. "Blackwell is mine." The men nodded in understanding. One of them, a grizzled former soldier named Peterson, spoke up. "What about the woman, Cap'n?" "Beggin' your pardon, Miss Jenkins, but that ankle's gonna slow you down if we need to move fast." "I'll manage," Zara insisted. Tucker's eyes met hers, a silent communication passing between them. "Miss Jenkins stays with me," he said with finality. "Let's move out." The ravine was narrow and steep-sided, forcing them to ride single file. The footing was treacherous, with patches of ice hidden beneath the snow. Zara focused on staying balanced in the saddle, the pain in her ankle a constant reminder of her vulnerability. They had been moving through the ravine for about 20 minutes when the distant sound of gunfire reached them. Jacob's diversion had begun. Tucker held up his hand, signaling the group to halt. "Right on time," he said with satisfaction. "From here, we proceed on foot." Horses would make too much noise. They dismounted, leaving one man to guard the horses, and continued up the ravine on foot. Tucker insisted on helping Zara, providing support when the terrain became particularly difficult. Despite her determination to appear strong, she was grateful for his assistance, her ankle protesting with every step. The ravine eventually opened onto a small plateau, beyond which lay the back of Holloway's hunting lodge. The structure was larger than Zara had expected, a substantial two-story building of logs and stone, with several outbuildings and a corral. From their vantage point, they could see men running toward the front of the property, drawn by the sounds of the diversion. "Wait for my signal," Tucker instructed, his voice low. "Remember, we want Holloway alive if possible. He needs to answer for his crimes legally." The men nodded, checking their weapons one last time. Tucker turned to Zara. "Stay behind me," he said, his expression intense. "Promise me." "I promise," Zara replied, touched by his concern. Tucker studied her face for a moment longer, then, in a move that surprised her, leaned forward and pressed a quick, hard kiss to her lips. "For luck," he murmured, pulling back before she could respond. Before Zara could gather her wits, Tucker gave the signal, and they moved forward, using the trees and outbuildings for cover as they approached the main lodge. The gunfire from the front of the property had intensified, suggesting Jacob's diversion was working as planned. They had almost reached the back door of the lodge when a man emerged, rifle in hand. Tucker reacted instantly, tackling the man before he could raise the alarm. A brief struggle ensued, ending with the man unconscious and Tucker slightly winded but otherwise unharmed. "Inside," he directed, leading the way through the door the man had just exited. They found themselves in a large kitchen, mercifully empty. Beyond it lay a hallway leading to what appeared to be the main part of the lodge. Tucker gestured for two of the men to check the rooms off the hallway while he, Zara, and the others continued toward the sound of voices coming from further inside. The hallway opened into a spacious great room dominated by a massive stone fireplace. Standing near it, engaged in heated conversation, were two men, one in an expensive suit, the other wearing the dusty clothes of a frontiersman but with an air of dangerous capability about him. Holloway and Blackwell. Tucker stepped into the room, his rifle aimed steadily. "Holloway," he called. "It's over." Both men whirled around, reaching for weapons. Tucker's rifle barked once, the shot knocking Blackwell's gun from his hand. Holloway managed to draw a small derringer from his coat pocket. "Drop it," Tucker commanded, his voice cold, "or the next shot goes through your heart." Holloway hesitated, his eyes darting around the room, looking for escape or assistance. Finding neither, he slowly lowered the derringer. "You're making a mistake, Lawson," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Tucker replied. "A thief and a bully who's finally run out of luck." Blackwell, cradling his injured hand, glared at Tucker with naked hatred. "Should have known the Pinkertons would send their best," he spat. "Still the same self-righteous bastard, ain't you, Lawson?" "And you're still a back-shooting coward," Tucker countered. "Sam Davis was worth 10 of you." Holloway, sensing the personal nature of the confrontation, tried to inch toward the door. One of Tucker's men stepped forward, blocking his path. "You're both going to jail," Tucker informed them. Holloway for fraud, extortion, and attempted murder. Blackwell for theft and the murder of Sam Davis. Holloway laughed, a cold, confident sound. "You think it's that simple? I own this county. The sheriff, the judge, they all answer to me. You'll never make these charges stick." "Maybe not here," Tucker conceded. "But the federal marshal in Helena might see things differently, especially when he hears about the forged documents you plan to file today." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Holloway's face. "You're bluffing, am I?" Tucker nodded toward the door, where Hank Brubaker had just appeared. "Brubaker's son is a deputy marshal. He's already on his way here with a federal warrant." Holloway's confidence visibly faltered. Federal charges were beyond the influence of his local connections. But before he could respond, a commotion erupted from the front of the lodge, shouting, more gunfire, the sound of running feet. Blackwell seized the moment of distraction to lunge at Tucker, knocking the rifle aside. The two men crashed to the floor, grappling for control. Holloway made a dash for the door but was tackled by one of Tucker's men. Zara, momentarily forgotten in the chaos, saw Tucker and Blackwell rolling across the floor, each trying to gain the upper hand. Blackwell was slightly larger, but Tucker fought with the disciplined skill of a trained soldier. They crashed into furniture, sending chairs and small tables flying. Suddenly, Blackwell's hand closed around a fallen fireplace poker. He swung it wildly, catching Tucker on the shoulder. Tucker grunted in pain but didn't release his grip. They struggled for control of the improvised weapon, their faces inches apart, both men grimacing with effort, with a desperate surge of strength. Tucker forced Blackwell's arm back, turning the poker against him. For a suspended moment, they were locked in a deadly embrace, then Blackwell's resistance abruptly ceased. The poker had pierced his chest. A look of surprise crossed Blackwell's face, followed by understanding. "Didn't think you had it in you, Lawson," he gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. "For Sam," Tucker replied grimly. Blackwell's eyes glazed over, his body going limp in Tucker's arms. Tucker released him, the man's body slumping to the floor, the life already gone from his eyes. Tucker rose slowly to his feet, his face grim but resolute. His shirt was torn and bloody, whether from his own blood or Blackwell's, Zara couldn't tell. Their eyes met across the room, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement, a shared understanding of the thin line between justice and vengeance. The moment was broken by Jacob Winters bursting into the room, rifle in hand. "Lodge is secure," he announced. "Holloway's men have surrendered or fled." Tucker nodded, his attention returning to Holloway, who was being held firmly by two of their men. "It's over, Holloway. Your empire ends today." Holloway's face was a mask of hatred and disbelief. "This isn't possible. You can't do this to me. I built this town. I own this valley." "Not anymore," Zara said, stepping forward, "and you never will." The aftermath was chaotic but organized. Holloway was bound and placed under guard, awaiting the arrival of the federal marshal. Blackwell's body was removed, and the wounded, thankfully few, and none serious, were tended to by Doc Miller. Word spread quickly through Bozeman. By nightfall, the town was abuzz with the news. Holloway's reign was over, his scheme exposed, his hired guns either in custody, dead, or fled. The sheriff, seeing which way the wind was blowing, suddenly discovered his backbone and claimed he had been suspicious of Holloway all along. Zara, Tucker, and the others who had led the fight gathered at Jacob's homestead that evening, sharing a meal and recounting the day's events. There was a sense of satisfaction, of justice served, though tempered by the solemnity that follows violence, no matter how justified. As the evening wore on, the men gradually departed, returning to their homes and families. Eventually, only Tucker, Zara, and the Winters family remained. "What happens now?" Jacob asked, pouring Tucker another cup of coffee. "The federal marshal will take Holloway to Helena for trial," Tucker replied. "With the evidence we have plus witness testimonies, he'll likely spend years in prison." "And Blackwell?" Martha Winters asked quietly. "Justice was served," Tucker said simply, his expression unreadable. Jacob nodded, understanding the finality in Tucker's tone. "And what about you, Lawson? Where do you go from here?" Tucker glanced at Zara, then back to Jacob. "I need to report to the Pinkerton office in Denver. Let them know the job is done. And after that." Jacob pressed, a knowing gleam in his eye. Tucker hesitated. "I haven't decided yet." The conversation shifted to other topics, but Zara couldn't help noticing a new tension in Tucker, a restlessness that hadn't been there before. He had accomplished his mission. Blackwell was dead, his friend avenged. What purpose would drive him now later, as they walked together in the Winters yard under a sky full of stars? Zara finally asked the question that had been on her mind all evening. "Will you leave tomorrow?" Her breath formed clouds in the cold air. Tucker was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "I should. The Pinkertons will want my report, and I owe Sam's widow a visit to tell her it's done." "Of course," Zara said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. "You have obligations." Tucker turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Zara, these past few days, they've changed something in me. For years, I've been running from my past, from connections, from settling anywhere for too long. And now," Zara asked softly, "now I'm wondering if maybe it's time to stop running." His eyes searched hers. Your ranch needs rebuilding. Your father's legacy needs protecting. That's a big job for one person, no matter how capable. Zara's heart quickened. Are you offering to help, Mr. Lawson? I'm offering more than that, Tucker replied, his voice low and earnest. If you'll have me. Zara took a step closer to him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. I barely know you, she whispered, echoing her words from days earlier. Tucker's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Sometimes you just know a person's measure right away, he repeated, his hand coming up to cradle her cheek. Is that enough to build a life on? Zara asked, though her heart already knew the answer. It's a start, Tucker said. The rest we figure out together. Zara reached up, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. Then yes, Tucker Lawson, I'll have you, for as long as you want to stay. Tucker's arms went around her, drawing her against him. That might be a very long time, Miss Jenkins. I'm counting on it, Zara replied, rising on tiptoe to meet his lips with hers. The kiss was different from the brief, urgent one they had shared before the confrontation at the lodge. This was slower, deeper, a promise rather than a desperate grasp at fleeting connection. When they finally parted, both were breathless, their eyes bright with shared emotion. I'll need to go to Denver, Tucker said, his forehead resting against hers. To make my report and settle my affairs, but I'll come back. I know you will, Zara replied with certainty. I'll be waiting. 2 weeks later, Zara stood on the porch of the main house at Whispering Pines Ranch, watching as a rider approached along the snow-covered road. Her heart leaped as she recognized Tucker astride midnight, the black horse's coat gleaming in the winter sun. Her ankle had healed during his absence, and she had used the time to begin rebuilding what Holloway's interference had damaged. Several of the men who had stood with them against Holloway had offered to work for her, giving her a core of loyal hands to start with. Holloway himself was awaiting trial in Helena, his empire crumbling as investigations revealed the full extent of his illegal activities. The railroad survey had confirmed what he had known. Whispering Pines Ranch would indeed be a key location for the planned line, ensuring the ranch's prosperity for years to come. Tucker dismounted as he reached the house, his smile warming his blue eyes as he looked up at her. He was dressed in new clothes, his travel-worn gear replaced, but otherwise he was unchanged, the same steady strength, the same clear gaze that had first captured her attention. You came back, Zara said, unable to keep the joy from her voice as she descended the steps to meet him. I promised I would, Tucker replied simply, closing the distance between them. He hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Are you sure about this, Zara? About me? I'm not an easy man, and my past. Zara silenced him with a finger to his lips. Your past made you who you are. The man who saved me in more ways than one. She lowered her hand to take his. The man I've fallen in love with. Tucker's expression softened, the last of his reserve melting away. I love you too, he said, the words clearly unfamiliar but no less sincere for it. Enough to want to build something real with you, a life, a family, if you'll have me. Is that a proposal, Mr. Lawson? Zara asked, her eyes twinkling. Tucker smiled, the expression transforming his rugged features. It is indeed, Miss Jenkins. Perhaps not the most romantic one, but it's perfect, Zara interrupted, wrapping her arms around his neck. And my answer is yes. Their lips met as the winter sun shone down on Whispering Pines Ranch, the land that had brought them together, the home they would build side by side in the years to come. 2 years later, Zara Lawson stood at the window of the ranch house, watching as her husband worked with the horses in the corral. Tucker moved with the same quiet confidence he brought to everything, his rapport with the animals evident in the way they responded to his gentle but firm handling. The railroad had come to the valley as predicted, bringing prosperity to Whispering Pines Ranch and the surrounding area. The depot, built on land Zara had sold to the railroad company at a fair price, negotiated on her terms, had grown into a small settlement, providing new markets for the ranch's cattle and horses. Tucker had proven to be as skilled a rancher as he had been a Texas Ranger and Pinkerton agent. Under their joint management, Whispering Pines had flourished, expanding its operations and gaining a reputation for quality livestock and fair dealing. But more important than the ranch's success was the life they had built together. Their wedding, held in the spring following their confrontation with Holloway, had been attended by everyone who had stood with them that day: Jacob and Martha Winters, Hank Brubaker, Doc Miller, and all the others who had risked their lives for justice. A cry from the cradle in the corner of the room drew Zara's attention away from the window. She crossed to lift her 6-month-old son, Thomas Jacob Lawson, into her arms. The baby, named for her father and the man who had helped them in their time of need, had Tucker's blue eyes and her dark hair. "There now, little one," she soothed, holding him close. "Your pa will be in soon." As if on cue, the door opened and Tucker entered, stamping snow from his boots. His face lit up at the sight of his wife and son. "How are my two favorite people?" he asked, crossing to press a kiss to Zara's lips before gently touching his son's cheek. "We're perfect," Zara replied, leaning into his embrace. "Just watching you with the horses. That new stallion seems to be settling in. He's a good animal, strong bloodlines. He'll sire some fine foals come spring." Tucker took the baby from her arms, cradling him with a tenderness that still moved Zara after all this time. "And how's my little cowboy today?" Thomas gurgled and grabbed at his father's finger, his tiny face alight with recognition and joy. "He missed you," Zara said, watching them together. "As did I." Tucker looked up at her, his love for her as clear in his eyes as it had been the day he returned to Whispering Pines. "Well, I'm home now, and I'm not going anywhere." It was a promise he had kept faithfully since their marriage. The restlessness that had driven him for so many years had given way to a deeper contentment, a sense of belonging that he had found with Zara and their life together. "I was thinking," Zara said, moving to prepare coffee as Tucker settled into a chair with the baby. "We should invite the Winters family for dinner on Sunday. Martha was asking about Thomas the last time I was in town." "Good idea," Tucker agreed. "Jacob mentioned he might have a lead on some new breeding stock we could consider. And Daniel's been courting that Miller girl. Might be an engagement announcement coming soon." "Really?" Zara smiled at the news. "They make a lovely couple." They continued discussing plans and ranch business as the afternoon light slanted through the windows. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting down to cover the landscape in a fresh blanket of white. Later, as they sat before the fire after putting Thomas to bed, Tucker took Zara's hand in his expression thoughtful. "You ever think about that day?" he asked. "When we first met, when those outlaws had you cornered in the snow." "Often," Zara admitted. "It was the worst day of my life, and the best, because it brought you to me." Tucker's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a gesture that had become familiar and cherished. "I was just passing through, had no intention of staying in this valley any longer than it took to find Blackwell." He shook his head, still amazed at how fate had intervened. "Then I heard gunshots, saw those men threatening you, and something just changed. For me too," Zara said softly. "When you pulled me onto your horse, I felt safer than I had since my father died. Even though you were a stranger, even though we were being shot at." She smiled at the memory. "I think I started falling in love with you right then." Tucker leaned over to kiss her, his lips warm and familiar against hers. "Best decision I ever made, riding to your rescue." "And the second best?" Zara asked, her eyes twinkling. "Coming back to you," Tucker replied without hesitation. "Building this life with you." He glanced toward the room where their son slept. "Starting our family." "Speaking of family," Zara said, a hint of mischief in her voice. "I was thinking Thomas might like a little brother or sister soon. What do you think?" Tucker's face lit up with joy and anticipation. "I think that sounds perfect." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Whispering Pines Ranch in a pristine white blanket. Inside, by the warmth of the fire, Tucker and Zara Lawson held each other close, secure in the love they had found against all odds, in the life they had built together, and in the promise of the future stretching out before them, a future as vast and full of possibility as the Montana sky.